Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Advancio Talks. The topic of today is the impact of self driving cars in the insurance industry. Once again, I'm your host, Jay Ibarra, and I'll guide you today through our topic. And before I go around the room introducing you to our great speakers for today, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Advancio. So Advancio is a global software development and IT consulting company based in beautiful Los Angeles, California. We're powered by uniquely talented individuals with a passion for problem solving and IT solutions. We can either develop your project or match you with the best tech talent. And now, let's talk about our speakers joining us today. A couple of experts in the insurance industry, and they are going to delight us with their knowledge and their expertise. And I'd like to start with one of our own, Karim Jernite. He is the co-founder at Advancio, and he specializes in .NET development and staff augmentations. He's been helping businesses throughout the years with their digital transformation. Karim, thank you for being here once again.
Thanks, Jay. It's good to be back.
It's good to have you, man. Thank you for joining us. And we have a special guest today. Her name is Monica Adwani, and she is a proud partner at Savito, an independent virtual professional company focused on business development, and at BRZ Insurance, a tech-based independent insurance agency focused on helping the Latinx community. And she leads Transcended with M podcast, and she has over 15 years of experience in the insurance industry. Quite a curriculum. Nice to have you here, Monica.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
We're also excited to have you. Thank you. And well, as always, as every time we have an advanced talk, I like to prepare a couple of questions for each one of you. And normally we have a Q&A session at the end of the questions, but I like to, play a little bit with your knowledge and your expertise and ask you guys a couple of questions. So the way I do this is I will ask one by one. So I have prepared here some questions for Karim and some for you, Monica. So how you guys feeling? Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's start. All right. Well, the first question I'd like to ask it over to you, Karim. And here it is. So how is the insurance industry preparing for self-driving cars?
That's a great question. So the insurance industry is broad. I mean, there's a lot of this question touches a lot of lines in the insurance industry. The most obvious one is the property and casualty auto insurance, since it is cars that are self-driving. Um, there's a lot of players. There's different tiers in the auto insurance industry, from the preferred all the way to the non-standard. Now, how they're preparing differently. Some of the large players out there have considered this for a long time, and they have invested significant time thinking about how that's going to impact their products. And you find yourself at the lower end of the non-standard world. It's usually more, they're not particularly preparing for it, but they're worried about it. They're watching it because that's the end tail of the insurance cycle, mainly used vehicles, older vehicles, and so on and so forth. Then you have the other side of the the health insurance, the warranty insurance, and all the other side products that used to get sold with the auto insurance that also are thinking about that from a stand buyer. But as far as the large corporate, the established insurance companies, they all have invested significant time thinking about this problem or challenge.
Right, of course. Monica, do you have anything to add into this question?
Well, I think for many years now, the data analytics have been something that it's been added into, when you're buying insurance, they ask you, would you want to add, this data analytic thing that goes in your car, right? And I think for so many years, they've been preparing for this moment. Now, are they ready? The answer is truly no. But are they getting prepared? Yes, and that is coming with a lot of data recollection, right? So I think just to piggyback on what Karim said, they've been preparing for a couple years now for this moment. However, I think that we still need more data in order to kind of like make any changes, or if we are going to make any changes in order to get where we need to get. So I think it's a work in progress.
Right, perfect. Yeah, I mean it's obviously those kind of companies, they have to adapt to what's coming next, right, in the future. Now, Monica, I'd like to ask you a question here in terms of the implications that this could, uh, what would happen. So, who would insure the self-driving cars? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the service provider? The owner of the car? And how can an accident be managed?
Well, that's a very gray area at this moment in time. I think Karim and I were talking about this, and we were like for 45 minutes discussing this topic. But right now, it is a very gray area because the insurance industry is not prepared for this, right? There is no policy that exists that can tell you in black and white what is really going to happen if a claim comes to play when a self-driving car is on the road, right? Like we are not prepared for that from a policy standpoint and from a legislation standpoint. So right now, it is a claim that can happen, and the manufacturer can be at fault, the client can be in fault, and then the insurance company can be, liable for it. So there is a very big, vast fine line depending on how that accident happened and how that plays out, that these could be covered, or this could be someone's responsibility. And right now, neither the industry, neither the manufacturer is prepared to respond for that type of claim. So in reference to your question, I think no one is really prepared right now, and we cannot really say who is going to be responsible because there are many factors that can be taken into consideration. Now, when it comes to like diminishing claims, I think it's going to be an increasing claims before we see a diminishing in claims, because we don't know what the reaction is going to be. Like there could be many accidents first, many things that happen first, because this is a brand new thing, right? Like nobody knows how the vehicles are going to react, how this really is going to work. So I think it's going to be a couple years before we really kind of, can say this is safe, not safe, this is going to be covered by the manufacturer, this is going to be covered by insurance. I think we're many years away from that.
Right, totally understandable. Karim, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. I think in the evolution of the self-driving, there's about 6 levels that we need to get to. Level 6 is still self-driving cars. So if the question is about level 6, I can tell you right now, it's impossible to know who it is. But while you're going through levels, we're right now at best at probably level 2, maybe 3, um, and the best in the market right now is probably Tesla and Mercedes. And
Yeah.
those cars right now, they're insured by the insurance carriers, because the technology is still as such where the driver is monitoring. It's just like a very, very advanced cruise control. And it's easier to categorize it like that for now. By the time it gets to full self-driving, it's going to be difficult because full self-driving means no steering wheel. It
Right.
means that the car needs to be able to talk to its surrounding. It needs to be able to communicate with through IoT with other things, right?
Yeah.
That means that the human factor there almost zero for
That's
accident
next step.
causing. And when that's the case, then we can talk about manufacturer warranty and things like that. But as long as the human interacts one way or another, insurance will have to kick in somehow.
Right, right. And it is totally, I was thinking about that, like the human factor, as far as the human factor is there is always going to be the backup of insurance. When the human factor is removed, then we will have to see, and we will have to see how the legislation will have to change, how the insurance policy language will have to change, how, the manufacturer plays into this role, because when it comes to play, it's going to be a computer error if that happens. So how is that going to play into the insurance having really a liability towards a manufacturer error? So there is a lot that needs to still be discovered, that needs to still be discussed and challenged in order to determine what really is going to impact the insurance industry for self-driving cars.
Right, excellent. Well, thank you, Monica. Thank you, Karim, for your input here. Now, Karim, I'd like to ask you this question in terms of software and security. So, how safe are autonomous cars in terms of passenger security and security software?
Well, it's, I mean, they're pretty safe. I mean, they're complicated. We see them right now. They're on the road. Pretty much level 1 has been achieved a long time ago, and every car has some kind of a adaptive cruise control, and lane assist, and people are getting comfortable with it. When they first came out, I would say maybe 15 years ago, or even maybe 20, almost 20 years ago, the adaptive cruise control was something of science fiction. Um, Today, the technology is proven enough where you can say it's safe to put it on adaptive cruise control and let the car follow the traffic, right? So safety really comes with time. Now, if we're talking about the fully autonomous car, we're not there yet. There's always some concerns. Every time you go from one level to another, the first iterations always has concerns. The adaptive cruise control version 1 didn't stop in traffic. It just crashed into the car in front of it. It only worked above 40 miles per hour, right? Today, it actually stops and follows the car after it. So I'm sure there's been a lot of crashes in between, but that's how you get the technology better. That's how you improve your safety record. You have to go through those hopefully non-fatal errors to kind of make the system better. That's just the nature of software.
You also have to take into consideration that all these back end data that goes behind the cruise control is also a human factor that is being studied, and all these things have been put into consideration by studies made by human factors. So when it comes to self-driving, or right now, the emission control, the cruise control, the brake control, all these things that exist with new vehicles being manufactured in the past 5 years or so, all these, different sets of data that the car is reading or that the car is aware of is based on studies on human factor error. So we have to take into consideration also that as the population improves or diminishes their ability to drive, all these factors are also going to change based on the manufacturing of the cars, because all of these comes from human factor studies. So with that being said, there is always going to be a margin for error, because it's not complete AI that is doing this specific study. It always going to include that error of the human factor. It brings me back to the movie. What was the movie that it was the Hudson River? I forget. I'm so bad with like names. But they were doing this study about how he landed in the Hudson River, but he shouldn't have landed there because he had enough time, but it was because it was our computer modulated. But then he added the human factor into it, and then he won the case as a pilot. So, it's the same thing for cars. It is going to happen that way, where we always going to have to take into consideration the human factor, because all these studies and everything that how they are programmed is based on human behavior.
There's one other new factor that this self-driving cars are introducing is the cybersecurity factor. And these are cars that can communicate and they have software. So now the new thing that is the hacking, right?
Yeah.
Your car might get hacked.
Yes.
But again, that gets improved with time. Today's cars, they can get hacked too. I mean, it's very rudimentary electronics, and they get hacked maybe to blink or beep or something. And these maybe can get hacked to kind of drive it from your garage to the warehouse where I'm gonna dismantle it and ship it over somewhere and sell it in parts, right? So
yeah.
But that's a different thing to worry about.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds kind of creepy if you figure it out like that. Yeah.
It's creepy, but it's totally true. It's not far from reality,
All right, good point there. Monica, I'd like to ask you another question. How would self-driving cars impact the cost of car insurances, and how would data play a big role in these rates?
Yeah. So right now, cars have definitely increased in the price point, and as you go electric or you go more AI driven cars, the cost is more just because of their computer and the data that they host. This data is actually utilized by the insurance companies in order to derive the rating factors, because they can tell if you own this car, you're within this age, you are within this range. They can definitely determine the risk that you run into a claim, right? Like if you are between the age of X and X and you own a specific type of car and you have this type of occupation, you can definitely have a higher risk of like nurses work in overnight, doctors that don't sleep, so I think in terms of data analytics, they've been preparing for this moment for a very long time, and the rates are actually, unless the state has a say on how to control those rates, the insurance companies have the ability to change the rates based on risk, and that's already being done. It's not. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that they're using data in order to, fuel the rates in order to cover for the losses that they can incur in the future. So for right now, I think what I can say is that, unless legislation changes, you are definitely going to see an increase on price on insurance going up year over year because of the risk that these type of vehicles run into getting replaced. It's a lot more expensive to replace a Tesla than it is a Ford, right? Because if you have an accident, if you have a fender bender, your Tesla computer can completely go off. But if you have a fender bender with a Ford, you just have to replace the maybe the backlight or something like that, right? But the computer doesn't really get, compromised. So when it comes to seeing it that way, you can have a total loss on a self-driven electric car, when in another type of vehicle might not. So it is a lot more expensive to really replace this type of vehicle, and that cost is passed on to the consumer. It is unfortunate, but it's true. So unless the manufacturer is willing to take the risk and legislation doesn't change in order to support that claim, then you will definitely see an increase on insurance year over year, because these claims are getting more expensive by the day, and the insurance companies somehow have to make up for the loss ratio that they are incurring on that type of vehicle and that type of risk.
I agree. I think when it comes to rates, there's insurance companies are here to make a profit. And what determines the profit is really two things: how much money they charge, which is the rate, and how much money they pay, which are the claims. And the job of the insurance company is maximize the rate, minimize the claims. That's really kind of the that's the formula. Now, insurance goes through cycles, right? There's soft cycles and hard cycles. Hard when everybody's making money and there's a lot of profit, then a lot of new players jump in, fighting for that piece. People have to reduce the rates, which actually end up squeezing the old players out or the new players out. Anyways, this keeps going back and forth. So at first, like what Monica said, the rates are going to be higher because even though the cars are safer, there's less accident, there's less frequency, right? What determines the loss is really frequency and severity. So even though there's less frequency, but the severity is higher because now you're having to replace a lot more expensive parts, right? So at the end of the day, as an insurance company, you might not be paying a lot of claims, but you're paying fewer claims with higher amounts, right? And then, so the job of the insurance company, now to tie into your second part of the question, how can they use the data? Well, a lot of companies, what they do, well, we can't raise our rates. We have to reduce the claims. And how do we reduce the claims? Like trying to prevent accidents from happening in the first place. So you get into the preventive mode, which is we see all these telematics on the cars telling, they tell literally the insurance company knows whether you accelerate off the green light or not, if you do a hard stop or a soft stop. And they actually send you messages saying, hey, you know what? Maybe you should learn how to drive a little softer or save on gas by doing this. So they're not really saying save on gas by going under 50, but what they're telling you, don't go over 65 because the chance of getting into an accident is higher. So you combine those two, you basically have you'll have a rating program that will, I think, going to continue to go up and down based on those cycles, and just in using different parameters that are gathered by the telemetrics.
And that's also when you start to see claims being denied as well. If you are considered a negligent driver, and because of the data that is being collected on your car and on you, then even though you're paying insurance, you can be denied for being a negligent driver. So right now, where we're seeing this industry going is, focusing less on the accidents that you have as a record and more on your behavior of how are you driving. And you have big companies that have the power, the money, and the data in order to start leading that way. So you're going to see a lot of companies shifting their rates based on behavior rather than on prior record, which a lot of states right now are focusing their rating on. So there, in the next 5 years, you're definitely going to see a big shift on, especially the bigger national carriers, focusing on behavior rather than history.
Excellent. Thank you guys for sharing that. Now, Karim, I'd like to ask you this question now that we're talking about the risks and all. So, do you think the insurance industry can expect to be at risk in the short term with the high cost of this advanced technology and the short amount of users?
Going back to the what we talked about earlier, I mean, auto insurance is not going anywhere. It's always going to be needed, at least not in the foreseeable future, until we attend level 6 and we're very comfortable with it for a long time. And the reason for that is because humans are always going to interact with the car, and humans are make mistakes, so somebody needs to take that liability away from them. Um, if and then you add to the fact that we have a pretty huge automobile um, park out there. There's a lot of cars in the road that were sold today that don't have self-driving, and they're probably going to be in the road for at least the next 20 to 30 years. Those cars need to be insured, and that's going to be the case for a few decades to go. So I think we're decades away from that, if any, and I don't think that we'll reach it at 100%.
Right, Monica, something to add?
I 100% agree. I have nothing to add for, in regards to that. I think we're going to be here for a little while longer.
Yeah, yeah, quite some more time here. Monica,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you this question. So, who do you think will benefit the most of self-driving cars? The insurance industry or the companies?
Um, if you make me choose at this moment in time, right now, in 2022, September, I will say the manufacturer will be the one that definitely benefits the most, just because they hold the power to determine where we go next, right? And right now, our industry is so old and it just always playing catch up, right? We are not working we're not working in advance. We're not working proactively. And I think if anything, I will say they hold the cards at this moment in time. And if anyone can benefit from it the most at this moment in time, it will be the manufacturer, not the insurance industry, not the consumer. It will be the manufacturer 100%.
Excellent, Karim. Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, right now, definitely the insurance with the technology we have today, insurance has been short end of the stick because they have to cover claims that
Yeah.
sometimes just people don't know how to use the technology so well. And the manufacturers, they covered themselves very well because they have a very good user manual that explains exactly how to do it. Like if you use cruise control and you think it's going to stop and it doesn't, I mean, the insurance is going to cover it, but it's on you. You didn't read the fact that it's not adaptive, right? So,
Yeah.
so for now, definitely the manufacturers are, because there's zero liability. I mean, every case, there's a case here and there, but overall, for the number of accidents that happen, they have very little liability. Now, down the line, I think that will change, and we'll start seeing some kind of a shifted responsibility. So, I mean, to get to level 5 autonomous driving, yeah, maybe there will be no insurance needed, maybe. But I think the liability will shift as we go up the level, or at least the shared liability will increase as we're going up the level of autonomous driving.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Karim and Monica. So, I had one question left for you, Karim, but you guys really went ahead of me, and you guys already answered it. So you guys really think about the future here. But I have a couple of questions that are part of the Q&A session here as well, and the people that joined the session, just feel free to drop in your question, and we'll make sure to respond them ASAP. And the people that are also on YouTube and LinkedIn, go ahead and drop your questions there as well, and we'll
Just
be
want
happy
to
to
add
answer
one
them.
more thing, Jay.
Go ahead.
Who's the biggest beneficiary from to answer another thing?
Yeah.
I think the biggest beneficiary from self-driving cars is going to be us humans. Like if I can just put my kids in the car and have them be dropped off instead of me driving them to school in the morning, or have my, or just take me to work and then go find a parking where I don't have to worry about parking downtown LA. Yeah, that would be really, really good.
I still haven't made my peace with that, Karim. I don't know how I feel about like just not having control over things. So I still have to like make my peace with that. But I'll probably join you in a couple of years.
Yeah, it will make everybody's life easier. Tip free valet all day. That'll be nice.
Yeah.
All right. So I have this question. I'll since you were the next to ask to Karim, ask you this question to you. So who is ahead in the race to sell autonomous cars? I think we know that answer. And what are they doing to achieve this?
Well, that's Tesla. Tesla's like they started selling fully autonomous cars. Maybe you could buy the upgrade for a self-driving car maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago before they even have it. Now it's pretty impressive what Tesla's done. They really revolutionized not only the auto industry from an environment perspective, but I think they just pushed the envelope of what the car can do and how what we could think of AI can do with with the simplest of tools. Like they don't have LiDAR and all that stuff. They still just use cameras and sensors and very, very, very good data analytics and very good software to do it. So definitely they're the first. You got Waymo, you got Mercedes, and there's some good Mercedes is very good too. They have a very good one. Waymo's been running taxis for a while, so there's a lot of um, good self-driving technology, but on a mass scale, Tesla for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies are already implementing some sort of software related, like Tesla, but I think Tesla is definitely ahead in the market for that area. Monica, I'd like to ask you this question that I have here as well. So, currently, what's the biggest obstacle or challenge in self driving? I mean, I know you have your concern, so that's why I'm asking you this question.
Do we have any other question? I'm just kidding.
Can we
Yeah,
skip it?
Monica, what's your hesitation?
Well, I think that the biggest challenge right now, from an insurance standpoint, right? Like not from a consumer standpoint, but from an insurance standpoint, is that if a claim happens, the unknown, right? Because with a self-driving vehicle, you can't ask what went wrong. You cannot ask, it's all going to be based on data analytics. And we are so used to be able to find the logic of things, right? And kind of like have that human behavior involved where like, I'm sorry, I fell asleep, or oh, I was tired, right? Like right now, I think the biggest thing is that we need to shift our mindset into a more data driven fact specific mindset where it's going to take us a little while. And I think, getting used to that is the biggest challenge, from any other perspective is very black and white. It's data. You broke, you hit the brake or you didn't hit the brake and you hit somebody in the back or you didn't. But, we never looked at it that way. We always looked at the benefit of the doubt, right? And I think shifting into not having that is specific gray box, it's the biggest challenge that we are facing right now, in that it's taking us it's going to take us a little while to get there. And I think that's the biggest challenge right now. I just don't know what else to say, because I struggle with that myself, as an insurance person for the past 18, 19 years. It's just, if things are changing rapidly, and we're not used to it.
Well, the insurance lady answered it. The geek answered his version. The geek
Yeah.
in me says there is technological obstacles. So other than insurance, there's a lot of there's AI needs to get better, machine learning needs to get better, the sensors, the tools need to get better. It's not that they haven't, just not to the point where you can completely let a car loose on the street and
Hmm.
have it account for all the unexpected events that can happen for it
Right.
and have an answer on how to handle those. Okay, so it has to
Hmm.
get to a point where the car has to kind of have to be intuitive and think for itself. So that's the technical aspect of things. And then there is the legislative. Like the government has to allow those things to go up. Like every time you go up a level, you have to get certified, and the government has to kind of say, yep, you can You can have the car make a right turn, they can't have a left turn for some reason, right? So you have to go through that. So I think the combination between like what the industry is prepared for and the technical, there's a lot of obstacles that makes us, again, what we said earlier, we're probably decades away
Yeah.
from full driving cars.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, like, my I come from an Hispanic family, and my mom will always say, you can control how you drive, but you can control other people. And she always say like, be looking at the back of the mirror always. So, it's like, how is that gonna happen with a self-driving car, right? So it's just all these things that you kind of like think about. It's like how these self-driving car is going to take in consideration the environment that is around you, because the car will know what it's doing, but would it be able to actually determine what is happening around it? Like that's my question, right? That's the insurance question from a claims perspective. So I'll leave it at that. Karim, you maybe might want to call me later. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I like it. You ended a question with another question. That
Right.
that's excellent. Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, it's pretty much trusting your life to a robot, and
Yeah.
take me there, and I'll take a nap. And wake me up when I'm there, right? Pretty much
Oh, I
like
will
that.
love that. I love taking naps. Don't go there, Jay. Don't go there.
We'll get there. We'll get there. I'm sure of that. Now, Karim, we have another question here. Somebody's asking. So, when will autonomous cars become affordable?
Uh, yeah, if we're talking about different level of automation, they already are. I mean, any car today comes with lane keep assist and adaptive cruise control and all this stuff that used to look like science fiction. If we're talking about the level 2 or level 3 self-driving, like the technology that it usually takes about 10 to 15 years for the technology to come in. Like when I said earlier, 20 years ago, Mercedes had the adaptive cruise control. That was the S-Class 500 that costed maybe $125,000 back then. But now you can go to Kia and pick up a Sorento, or you can pick up a Kia Niro, the smallest one, and for $25,000, which has that technology. So I think it's usually about 10 to 15 years before the technology becomes common. Um, so,
Perfect. Well, hopefully that answers the question. And I have one last one over here, and I'll ask you this one to you, Monica. It says, when will self-driving cars legally be possible?
I mean, they're already legal and possible. Maybe not in the US yet. Even though we do have some self-driving car programs here. But you see places like the Middle East, like Dubai, that already have taxis that are self-driven cars. So I think it's not a question of legality, but question as of when are we going to be ready in order to afford and in order to service this type of vehicle, because that's another thing, right? Like, vehicles are available, but are we able to service that vehicle, and are we able to give it the programming and the updates that it needs in order to continue functioning? Because this is not just a one-time purchase. Like, you're gonna continue. It's like a phone, right? iOS update 9.5, whatever it is that is gonna be called, right? Like, you're gonna have the 1.5 and 1.9 versions that you're gonna have to update your car into. So I think it's a question of when, not a question of legality, because I mean, they're already legal. We're just not ready.
Perfect. Karim, anything to that?
oh, that's the. I mean, it really depends on the society how we are ready for the cars. When people want something, they put pressure on the government to make it happen. So when we're ready for it, things will change. Just like um, we talked about Tesla and how hard was it for them to even get the first semi-autonomous thing out that changed lanes on its own. and it got done. And then now they have the ones that you can read the red light and the stop and stop at the stop signs, and they got it approved. So it's all about consumers and legislation. So when they all come together, cars will be in the street.
Mhm.
Right. And let's not even talk about flying cars. 'Cause
Well,
that's yeah,
Monica said, let's go to Dubai for that.
Give me 10 more years and I'll do that tech talk with you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of disappointed. Back to the Future lied to us big time. So well, all right. So I believe that was the last of the questions that I had here from the audience. Let me just quick check if there is another one. Nope, I believe that was the last one. So, guys, I appreciate you guys taking the time today and being part of another edition of Advancio Talks. Karim, thank you for being here once again. Monica, we're so happy to have you, and hopefully you can join us in another session in the future, maybe talking about flying cars or any other topic in specific.
Count on me. I'll be here ready and honest.
Excellent. We're happy to have you and for you to express your concerns and